How accurate is Wall Street to what you see in the movies? People like yelling and screaming and showing papers everywhere.
No question about it. Back in the 80s, that was incredibly a great rendition of what we did on a daily basis. We traded millions of shares every day. The open outcry, screaming and yelling, absolutely frenetic, adrenaline-filled, wild, crazy time is exactly how it was in reality. There were 8,000 people in that room. You guys were on the floor with me recently. You saw how now it's, it's winded down to probably 700 or 800. But back then, there was a huge support staff on the floor. There were 4 rooms. There were thousands of brokers, 1,366 brokers. There were clerks and reporters and squads and, literally thousands of people, open outcry, screaming and yelling. And I love that. I thrive on chaos, right? I still to this day. So I asked them for a regular job, and in September, they gave me a job as a clerk. I became an option clerk. And back then, so there's no training to be a broker on the floor. In order to, one's quest when they get down to Wall Street is to become a broker. In order to become a broker, somebody had to leave the post. So I did it in 3 years. I got very lucky. One guy died, one guy retired, one guy got fired. And I moved up the ranks. And in 3 years, I went from teletypist to broker. I got my first seat in April of 88.
What are the salaries like starting off on Wall Street, starting off from the bottom, working your way up? Was it a high-paying job?
No, not at all. A squad made $67 a week. My first job in 1985 as a clerk, a retail clerk, I made $21,000 a year. And then I got as high as on my way to becoming a broker over those 3 years. I think by the time I got my seat, I was making $25,000 a year. Now, it depends. There were people back then already making a lot of money. But you have to realize it's important for people to know, to look at the landscape of Wall Street, that there are the upstairs people and there's the downstairs people. Wall Street is called the street for a reason. Most of the people who have been traditionally employed on the floor of the exchange are not your MBAs, are not your sort of high-flying, M&A venture capital type of guys. Those are the, it's a different breed of people. These are people who grew up in the neighborhood, heard about Wall Street, came down there, started at the bottom. Great rags to riches stories. The guy who once shined shoes went on to become a multimillionaire market maker. So there's lots of really fun stories about how people, went up in the ranks. But it took a while for me to make money. I mean, it was not until probably early 90s where I got an offer from Ivan Boesky, in fact. So Ivan Boesky was one of those, he was the first guy to get caught insider trading, right? He was claiming that he was having premonitions about stocks trading and takeovers and all this stuff. And it turned out that he had a rabbi up at Goldman Sachs who was giving him inside information. He ended up getting indicted and fined $180 million. And
$180 million?
He made billions of dollars.
So the 180 in hindsight was really just a slap on the wrist of...
Absolutely. So the whole, the original Wall Street movie with Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen is the story of Ivan Boesky.
Is it really?
Right.
Yeah, I had no idea.
That's the original. And if you read the story of Ivan Boesky, it's amazing. So
how was he getting the insider information?
He had a guy up at Goldman.
He had a guy at Goldman Sachs, and then when they were acquiring a certain company, they would let him know, and then he would just buy it. He would give him the phone call,
and he'd go, listen, in about 3 weeks, we're going to be buying, RJR Nabisco is going to be buying Beatrice or whatever it may be. And so he would give him that information. He would start to accumulate large blocks of stock, right? And one should have known it at the time, but it was not something we did know because they were buying, when they went into a stock, they were buying millions of shares of stock. And he was claiming that he was having these visions at night about potential takeovers. And of course it was not. It was a call. The guy's name was Dennis Levine. And so he did it for a number of years, made millions and millions of dollars. And he was there at every one of the takeovers. And everyone was like, how did you know? It was like, it was like, I heard it. He used to say, I think I heard the voices under my pillow or something. And then, of course, after the investigation, I think it was a Giuliani investigation back when he was the DA, that they found out he was getting inside information. But so it took a while for me to end up making money on Wall Street. But back then, there were brokers who were making, it depends depending on what company you worked for, if you were a house broker or a $2 broker, which was an independent commission broker, I mean, there were guys making, 100, 200,000. Probably there were guys making more money than that. But the street is not, back then, people have this vision of these big Wall Street bonuses, right? If you look at the press from the 80s and 90s, you would hear about, people making $30, $40 million bonuses. And that was not ever something that happened on the floor of the exchange. Those were the guys, the investment bankers, the guys upstairs on trading desks who were putting the deals together and doing things. Those were the guys who were making the major money.
How does that differ from the lower to the upper? And can you move from the lower to the upper, or are there two separate just careers entirely?
It's a different career.
Okay.
If you work on the floor of the exchange, there's probably a cap on the amount of money you can make. Now it's a completely different story. But back then, there were people making money, but it was not a function of people who were upstairs it was a different breed of people. It was a totally different job. We have to realize that us on the floor, right, who were trading, open outcry, it was a different temperament of human being, right? These guys had a lot more education than most of the guys on the floor. These guys were street smart. Those guys were book smart, right? And the book smart guys who put together the big deals, if you were a guy who put together an M&A deal and the deal was worth, $500 million, your compensation was a percentage of that deal. That didn't happen on Wall Street. We were really working hard. We were commission brokers.